person or family that's running a B&B down the road suddenly is confronted with two fellows who want a room, and the B&B management says, oh look, I'll give you two separate rooms. Oh no, we want one room. And he said, but look, I only believe that sex is between a man and a woman, you know, in marriage. Well no, we're in a committed relationship, we want a single room with a double bed. I said, sorry, I can't give you that. It would offend my belief. Whether the belief is crazy, nonsense, whatever it is, has he got the right to that belief? Can he manifest his freedom to express himself in that circumstance? The law says he cannot. In Australia, the law says that person has to go beyond accepting the orientation of an individual and must embody and encompass the actual activity. And to make matters worse, the Victorian Court of Appeal earlier this year released a statement in respect to a case called the Christian Youth Group, which went there on appeal, and they said, the court was unanimous on this, they said the orientation is not of itself complete without embracing the activity associated with that orientation. Now, to me, that is a step too far. It is bad law, a bad judgment, and a misunderstanding of what orientation is all about and what discrimination is all about. Now, it's not something that I'm saying to you and haven't said to the court. In fact, we acted as amicus in that case, and we were accepted by the court as amicus. And we put the view that, look, whilst you've got two rights, whether the rights are soundly based or not soundly based does not matter. The obligation of a court is to try and find a balance. I mean, for heaven's sake, if you've got 10 B&B operators, why do you have to insist that this person has to give me a double room when this person down the road will give you a double room? Why do I have to insist my rights on this person who wants to exercise his rights, yet I can't do it because I don't want to go an extra 200 yards or an extra half a car where there's no questions asked? This person lives in peace and you can live in peace. These are the private affairs. But no, we're not allowed to do that. And this is all because of this sort of creeping political correctness, that no longer can you just manifest your belief. Now, I think I'm just about out of time, but I'm going to give you a more comical example of where these discrimination laws just go straight off the bat. In Queensland, the Anti-Discrimination Act has amongst a number of other attributes too. One is, of course, sexual preference, sexual orientation, and the other one is lawful sexual activity as a separate attribute. In other words, you cannot discriminate against Mr. Duffy if he's engaged in lawful sexual activity. Mind you, hopefully not publicly, but privately. Now, what happened in this particular case was that a woman in the central Queensland mining area hired out a motel room. That was okay, but management suddenly discovered that there was quite a strong filing of men going to this room. And I got a little bit suspicious as to what the hell going on. Is this woman running some sort of a betting operation or something like that? And they discovered that she was actually engaged in prostitution in the room. Mind you, today you're not allowed to say prostitute, you've got to say sex worker. So another one of these sort of more modern developments. But anyway, the motel management said, look, we want you to leave. This is not a good image for the mums and dads and the kids who use other rooms. She says, well, that'll cost me a lot of money. I'm sorry, you'll have to go somewhere else, not here. He said, well, and they said, furthermore, don't ever bother coming back here. because we won't give you a room under those circumstances. So she repaid all of that same gratitude and took it off to the Anti-Discrimination Tribunal. The grounds for the discrimination was that she had a sexual orientation of having as many men as she liked, and secondly, she was engaged in lawful sexual activity, because prostitution in private is not unlawful in Queensland. And guess what? The tribunal found the motel guilty and said that prostitution, provided you didn't sort of try and promote yourself on the streets and hail down cars and things like that, was lawful under the Act, the Prostitution Act. Now it took, oh gee, that's my telephone, that's an interruption. Could you do that, Mr. Duffy?
No, that's cool. No.
Now what happened was, it actually ended up going to the Supreme Court of Queensland before it was overruled. Because you have this silly attribute that you can't discriminate against people engaged in lawful sexual activity. Now the good thing about it was the Supreme Court of Queensland identified, which things that we already knew privately, why there was such an attribute introduced by a previous Labor state government of lawful sexual activity. And what was it? To make sure that homosexual acts were never deemed to be unlawful. And that's what the origins of it all were, you see. Now, there might have been a good reason for having lawful sexual activity as a protected right, but you can see the abuse process here that comes about because we're just too ready to move away from norms of behaviour and common decency that most of the community still expects. What you want to do in private is perfectly okay. What's happened today, everything has to be manifested publicly, and you have no right to object to that sort of conduct. Now in this morning's Daily Telegraph I read on the plane, if anyone saw it, this photograph of what's happening in Syria, in an area occupied by the Islamic State movement. That is a woman who was put in a shallow grave with her head sticking out and stoned to death because of alleged adultery. Now, if you come out and say that that's what extremism represents, you are powered down because it's alleged that you're a racist or you're sticking out on one race only. Not right. Political correctness is mad. Thank you very much.
Thank you. And this is what happens, or what you have to be prepared to get involved in if you, quote, offend somebody. And it's important to understand, I think, that in a sense, to talk about does political correctness infringe free speech? Well, it's sort of a euphemism to talk about political correctness, because what we're really talking about is a cultural war that is being waged by what I would describe as a neo-communist movement against white people, Christians, and men, heterosexual men. And I, as I say, I've had some experience with that. My first experience at Macquarie University and with the Human Rights Commission came in June and July 2005, when I saw this headline in the local paper that was thrown onto my lawn in Parramatta. Now, with this little black Sudanese girl, 2 or 3 years old, and the headline is, "Now Mom and Dad are Aussies like me." I got a bit annoyed at that, because for me, an Aussie, and I have to admit it, when I hear the word Aussie, I don't think of someone from the Sudan. I think of people who basically are European and more specifically, basically more likely than not of a British background. So I wrote a letter to the Parramatta Advertiser, and I'll just give you the highlights of it, which basically, I gave it a headline, The Path to National Suicide. And I said that now that a large number of Sudanese refugees have been settled in the Parramatta Blacktown area, Anglo-Australians are once again expected to acquiesce in the steady erosion of their distinctive national identity. And then I quoted Community Relations Commissioner Stephen Kirkgarian, who was quoted in the paper previously as having that Australians have a responsibility to help those, when I put it, on the losing side of every third world civil war, to settle here in Australia, and it would just somehow magically all work out. And I said that utopian fantasy is particularly likely to unravel as local African tribal groups grow in size and confidence. Experience practically everywhere in the world tells us that an expanding black population is a surefire recipe for increases in crime, violence, and a wide range of other social problems. I'll leave it to you to decide whether events over the last 10 years or so have borne out my prediction. But the reaction was, first of all, at the university, as David indicated, I was suspended from teaching for these remarks. That wasn't enough. The New South Wales Board of Jewish Deputies, note this, I mean, not the Sudanese community, but the New South Wales Board of Jewish Deputies decided to fund not one, not two, but 3 prominent Jewish lawyers to pursue me in the Human Rights Commission. George Newhouse, who I'm sure you've all heard of, David Knoll, and Anna Katzman, SC, who is now a New South Wales judge, were all involved in producing at the university, from the Vice Chancellor down, all of whom are WASPs, i.e. white Anglo-Saxon Protestants, could, in effect, turn on one of their own and prosecute them for the crime of trying to defend the interests of the Anglo-Australian people. So, I write this book, okay? Which was published in 2011. It's about the WASP question, and it essentially tries to explain why WASPs are people who will never take their own side in a fight. That's almost the definition of a WASP these days, okay? So, and in trying to work out why that is, it seemed to me that one big part of the answer to that is a sort of a spiritual thing. You know, somehow something in the biocultural evolution of white Anglo-Saxon Protestants has just left them in a way that they really can't see that one of the ways in which you find God is through your own nation. Acts 17:24-28. So essentially, it seemed to me that this is, on some very important level, it's not just a political problem or a social problem, it's a theological problem. So I decided, hey, now that I'm retired, I discovered that just up the hill from where I was living in Parramatta, there's United Theological College, which is part of Charles Sturt University. So I thought, hey, I'll go do a theology degree. and sort of try to work out, what in a sense is wrong with, like, for example, the Anglican Church. Why does the Anglican Church not see it as part of its mission to nurture and preserve the English people and the Anglo-Saxon people which gave birth to that church? Indeed, that was the whole raison d'etre for centuries of the Anglican Church. So that's what I did. I enrolled in a Bachelor of Theology course at this college, which, as the name suggests, is pretty much run by the Uniting Church, which I like to think of as being sort of the Communist Party at prayer. Okay. And when I got there, I very quickly found that everything I had ever thought about liberal churches was worse than I had ever imagined. This was the textbook that I had in my first year Intro to Theology course called Faith Seeking Understanding. And you can kind of get the flavor from the back of it here. I mean, this is the second edition of a very popular textbook. And it features improvements from cover to cover. Besides updating and expanding the entire text of the book, Migliori, the author has added 2 completely new chapters. The first, Confessing Jesus Christ in Context, explores the unique contributions to Christian theology made by recent theologians working in the African American, Asian American, Latin American, Hispanic, feminist, womanist, and Muyerista traditions. Conspicuously absent there is anything about Anglo-Saxons. In fact, he says, in the intro here, that while I am Protestant North American, white and male, my background and experience do not conform to the stereotypical WASP profile. Instead, he wants to talk about, how wonderful African American theology is in struggling against the centuries of oppression that white Anglo-Saxon Protestants have inflicted upon women and all of those other groups. Now, about 3 weeks after I began at this college, and I have to say, I should say, that in the first few weeks, naturally, and both in the lectures and in the tutorials, I expressed some reservations, I'd have to say, about the perspective that this textbook was adopting. But there was also what for me was an extremely, I'd have to say, upsetting experience, because they hosted a conference on a Saturday in March 2011, which was the first year I had, the year I had started there. And the conference was about the myths of whiteness. It was essentially a talk, an all-day talk given by this Yorkshireman, as he described himself, Anthony Reddy, who's a well-known black liberation theologian from England. And they had him talking and a whole bunch of other people who also had things to say, all of whom were non-whites. And throughout the whole day, essentially it was a celebration of bashing whitey for all the terrible things that white people have done Graham Mundine, who was the Aboriginal guy there, actually gave a talk celebrating the murder of several white settlers up in northern New South Wales, because of course they deserved it, didn't they? And so I found this a bit hard to take, I'd have to say, especially when there was a lady, a Chinese lady, a Chinese dermatologist from Western Sydney, who expressed the view that there were no really significant genetic differences between the races. And I wasn't quite sure how a dermatologist sort of, would really be an expert in this. And actually, this was in the lunchtime, and I could see where things are going. And since I just lived down the bottom of the hill, I went home and grabbed this book on race, the reality of human differences. And one of the things the author, who's an emeritus professor in anthropology from the University of California, Berkeley, one of the points he makes is that, that book was published in something like 2004. One of the points he makes in